All right. Good morning, everybody. How debt buyers work in Canada. What's happening?
Good morning. Good morning.
You're looking all dapper Dan with your collared shirt and gelled hair.
Hair's long. I need a haircut.
So talk to our viewers, man. What is the deal with debt buyers in Canada? I think that the vast majority of the public are in the dark, and those that are kind of in twilight are thinking that most debt buyers pay like 1 or 2 cents on the dollar for expired debt and go and try to collect it. How does it really work?
So, to be honest with you, I believe there's a vast or a wide range of theories in with people in public.
Mhm.
Some people have the insight, some people don't. Some people think that collection agencies are buying everything. And some people think that collection agencies are buying nothing. Some people believe collection agencies are paying nothing for the debt, and some people think people are paying, or the agencies are paying a ton of money for the debt. So I'm pretty sure there's a wide range of scope between what people's beliefs are. And obviously, the purpose of today's show.
What's the difference between a debt buyer and debt listed on contingency first, and then maybe
Yeah.
talk about the debt buyers?
Yeah, so there's two different ways that a bank will deal with collection agencies. And one of them is known as contingency paper or contingency assignment. And that is basically the bank still holding the rights to the account, meaning you still owe the money to the bank. And what they're doing is they're asking the collection agency to collect on their behalf. So they're essentially a third party company that will be retained to contact you, to call you, to pester you, to harass you, or whatever definition you want to use it, to get the money back for the bank. And those contingency agreements or assignments are generally anywhere between 6 and 12 months. The majority are 6-month agreements, meaning that the collection agency will hold them for 6 months and then they'll go to another collection agency. Occasionally it's 9 months and occasionally it's 12 months, but more often than not, it's a 6-month contract. And they get paid by the bank based on what they collect. So a percentage of what they're collecting back on behalf of the bank, they'll get paid a percentage of that. So for simple numbers, everyone's different. So I can't give you specifics because everyone's going to have a different number. But if for every dollar you collect on behalf of a bank, that collection agency on contingency assignment might get about 25 hold on, for every dollar you might get back 25 cents on that dollar.
Hmm.
So the other one is the purchase paper or debt buyers. So some banks will actually sell the debt and wash their hands of the debt and say to the collection agency, you want it, you buy it, you can buy it for whatever the purchase amount is going to be. Again, that will range depending on many different factors. And then the collection agency owns the debt. There's no requirement of the bank to be involved in the process whatsoever. If you contacted the bank to say, hey, these guys are bothering me, or I need to ask you a question, they're just going to tell you, sorry, we don't own the account anymore. You need to contact the collection agency. We've sold it to them.
Do they
So,
do they completely wash their hands of it? Because I believe there was a time where credit card companies would sell debt to debt buyers for whatever they sold it for. But if they did something that may perhaps tarnish the name of that bank or credit card company, if the customer called the bank or credit card company or an ombudsman, for example, they would sometimes get involved, even though they sold the debt. They would be like, well, hang on a second, it's got our bank name on it or whatever, and you're making us look bad by saying things like this. Or is that
yeah,
or is that gone now?
yeah, that's still around. I know there's quite a few provisions with some of the banks that tell the collection agency partners that they're selling to that there's certain provisions they have to follow
Hmm.
in order to qualify for the purchase of the debt. But yeah, there's more often than not, if you're contacting a bank who's sold the account, they really have no interest in dealing with it anymore. They've washed their hands and they advise you of that. They'll tell you, we've sold it. We no longer hold the rights. You have to contact XYZ to discuss and finalize your payment. Now, the reason why they do it that way is because they're getting money back on the purchase of the account from the collection agency. Now, it's not a large amount; it will vary
Hmm.
depending on very many multiple factors like how old the account is in arrears, how many collection agencies it's passed through, the branding of the bank. So if it's a top bank, a top 5 bank in Canada, they'll probably sell it for more than one of the higher risk lenders who are internet based. So it all depends on those factors, and it will range anywhere between probably 2 cents on the dollar to, I'm thinking, probably 15 cents on the dollar on the high end. So it all depends on the factors. So essentially, when the bank sells the account, they really don't have much input anymore, and you're usually dealing with an entry level telephone recipient. So if you're calling the bank, you're dealing with a customer service rep. They're not going to engage into detailed conversation about an account, which they can see on their system is no longer on their database. It's gonna show that the account's been sold into contact XYZ collection agency, and that entry level, customer service rep is not going to engage into detailed conversation about what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So what else do we need to know?
So there are a few debt buyers in Canada. Obviously, we're talking about Canadian debt and Canadian consumers, so that's what our show's obviously focused on. So there's quite a few debt buyers in Canada. Most of them are Canadian. There are some American debt buyers that are up here in Canada buying Canadian credit card debt portfolios and trying to collect on it. There's certain things that you need to know as a consumer or as a viewer. Some of them are actually quite decent to deal with. The majority of them are decent to deal with, and some of them are actually quite a bit more complicated and difficult to deal with. So hopefully when you're dealing with a debt buyer, what you need to remember is that their focus and their primary focus is recovering what is owed on the new debt that they've purchased. So if they've bought an account for $10,000, that's the amount of the debt. Well, they might have paid a fraction for it, which hypothetically might have been on 10,000, might have been $1,000 of what they might have paid for it. They still want you to pay the 10,000 back, and they're going to be forcing you to pay the 10,000 back. So what you need to do is you need to remember when you're negotiating with these debt buyers or when you're talking to these debt buyers, you need to do your best in order to position the settlement, as we've shown in previous broadcasts, in the best picture possible to get them to look at your offer. So it's just important to know that some debt buyers are going to be difficult, some debt buyers are going to be less difficult, and that there are going to be differences in how the accounts are located at collection agencies. Some of them are owned by the collection agency, and some of them are on contingency, meaning that they still have to reach back to the bank and get approval for certain settlements that are pushed through, which was the main focus of this show, is what I wanted to get into momentarily.
Mm-hmm. Fire away, man. The table's yours.
All right. So as I said, some collection agencies are buying the debt on behalf of the banks, and therefore they have the legal rights to the account. If you're going to make a settlement offer to that collection agency in that type of example, they don't need to reach back to the bank and say to the bank, we have an offer on the table for $4,000 on an account balance of 10. It's now that collection agency's decision on what they want to do about your settlement. And that's who you need to convince, is the collection agency, on approving the settlement. Now, on the flip side, if it was on the contingency assignment, so the bank still owns the rights and they're just sending it to the collection agency to collect on their behalf, then when you're making an offer in that example, the collection agency still needs to send the offer to the bank for review and instruction. So you're making an offer for $4,000 on 10. They need to put the information together. They need to submit it to the bank. The bank needs to review it. The bank makes a decision. The bank then notifies the collection agency what that decision will be. And then the collection agency will tell you, our client has accepted, our client has declined, our client has made a counteroffer, whatever the situation is going to be. So there's certain things that you need to know when you're dealing with a collection agency if it's being purchased debt, and it should state on the letter that you receive from the collection agency if the account has been purchased, because it should state that the original debt was owed to, and then it'll say XYZ Bank. So you need to pay attention to these things, because it will be very helpful when you're talking to them, knowing what exactly needs to be done, because the information on the letter and what's happening with the account, when it was purchased, how long ago it was purchased for, what the balance is, which debt buyer has it, all these things will be important when you're trying to negotiate the settlement with that particular collection agency.
Cool. And as far as settlement amounts, what are the targets?
Well, their targets are always 100%. Everyone that you're trying to deal with wants their full money back, regardless of the circumstances. But what we're striving for is essentially we're trying to get what we can do based on the client's financial circumstances. We need to demonstrate that to the collection agency we're dealing with. So we're looking at a range of probably a 30% settlement, upwards of around 50 to 60% at the high end. It all
Mm.
depends on your personal financial situation. So, I can tell you that I'll get you a settlement for 30%, but the reality is that might only be feasible and possible on an individual in extreme dire financial situation. So it all depends on what's going on with your personal situation. I can't go to a collection agency when you're making $100,000 and you own a property and say, hey, this person wants to pay you 30%. They might laugh at that and say it's not going to happen. So it all depends on the personal financial situation. The more financially dire you are in, the better your settlement will become. So it's essentially the spectrum that you should be looking at is, I'm doing well financially. I shouldn't expect the collection agency to give me a huge deal. Or if you're on the lower end of the spectrum, you're really struggling, you're on a disability pension or you're on a federal pension for them from the government because you're retired, then on that example, you should be looking at the lower end saying, okay, they should be giving me a better break because I don't have much to work with here.
What about the litigious nature of some of these debt buyers? Because over the years, I've seen them do some really, really dumb stuff, like throw money at suing people that are really considered judgment proof. And all that means is they'll never have any ability to collect on a judgment they get in court and enforce it ever. But I've seen some of them do this in the past. Are they still like that? Are they less litigious than like banks and credit card companies? Are they more litigious? Like, how's that looking today?
Again, hard to put a picture on that. I would say that the vast majority of debt buyers don't waste time with litigation. There are a few that will spend money and resources on it. Generally speaking, they should be smarter than what they are. I'm seeing, the occasional lawsuit against an individual that is judgment proof, like you just said, and judgment proof essentially means that they've got no income to be garnished, they got no real estate property to be secured against, and yet the collection agency has brought a claim against them. And when I see these things, I look at that and I kind of shake my head and I think to myself, what are you doing? That's just a colossal waste of money. It's a colossal waste of resources and time. The litigation process is not quick. It can take, especially during COVID, I've seen lawsuits now last over 2 years because of delays with COVID. Obviously, first things first, courts were closed for 6 months. Nothing was happening in the court systems for 6 months between March 2020 and September 2020. And then even after that, everything is now done remotely. So they're scheduling all the attendances remotely unless it's a serious criminal matter. And so all the matters that I'm dealing with, which is civil litigation between banks and consumers, is all done remotely via Zoom or Microsoft Talks, an online video platform. So these lawsuits can take years, and some collection agencies feel that it's in their best interest to commence a claim and let it sit there, collect dust in the litigation process, and then after the fact, do nothing with it. So some still do it, and like I said, I just shake my head at it, thinking, what a waste! It's a colossal waste.
All right. So those are the main points I think that need to be covered. Is there anything else before we wrap up and kind of sign off with everybody?
Um,
Well, here, let's grab this question over here. The statement Rochester says, "My line of credit payment for my bank is $11.60 a month. Will it be lower if I allow it to be taken over by a third-party collection agency? I only make less than $38,000 a year."
well, the question is not 100% clear. If his line of
I think
credit,
he's hoping that his payment will go lower if it goes to collections, but that's not the case. If a debt goes to collections, the protocol that collection agencies use by default is PIF, which stands for payment in full. So um, their expression of the debt is it gets assigned if you're paying X amount of dollars to a creditor, but then you go into default at some point for 5 or 6 months, and then they list it to a collection agency. If your balance is 30 grand, the collection agency is going to say payment in full is due, no payments are an option. We're going to take this action if you don't do it within this period of time, and they try to strong arm you, sort of thing. So if you want a real plan to get out of debt, I mean, $1,160 a month for a debt, I'm assuming is probably what, $20,000 to $30,000 balance, Andrew? Like, what's
I
the?
just calculated that when you were talking, and then from my calculation, it'll be 50,000. So I don't know if he's referring to that his minimum payment per month is $1,160, or if he's saying that his debt total is $1,160. But
This
you're
is my
right.
line of credit payment. So realistically, you'd be in a better position signing up for a debt settlement program if it's Canadian debt.
Yeah, that's a
So
large debt load. If it's 50 odd
yeah,
thousand, that's a big debt load.
yeah. So get in contact with the office. The ticker's been running below. You can learn how to get your debt eliminated over the next 3 to 5 years at totaldebtfreedom.ca. Settlements usually get them reduced around, somewhere to between 60 to 70%. Really depends on your circumstances, but you can get a free quote. Yeah, he says it's 66,500. So that's pretty much what you were saying. He said that's the minimum payment. So give the office a call and see if there's a way that you can get on a plan that actually gets you out of debt. Because at the end of the day, like the litmus test I always tell people is, look, if what you're doing isn't bringing the balance down and you've been doing it for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and you're still seeing yourself throw good money after bad and your balance isn't coming down and it's mostly going to interest, you're going to be doing that for a very long period of time. So if your financial situation is not getting any better, the best thing to do is to get on a new plan. Like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So go to totaldebtfreedom.ca, talk to somebody in the office, make sure you schedule in a call and get yourself a quote. And next steps can be taken from there. If the program that the office offers isn't a good option for you, they're going to recommend another program. It's not like, one size fits all. Let's just cram everybody into a debt settlement plan. It's like, hey, you know what? Maybe you're a good candidate for bankruptcy. They'll tell you, what to do with something like that. So definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah, and it's a free consultation, guys. There's no harm in having a conversation, 15, 20, 30 minutes to discuss your situation, to see what's best in your interests. And if it's not a best fit for us, we'll definitely direct you to what a program would be a better fit based on your circumstances. There's no harm in getting that information. It's better to know what's going on rather than not know what your options are.
Real talk indeed. All right, so let's wrap it up on that note. We'll see you guys next Saturday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you guys have an awesome Father's Day weekend. Make sure if your old man's around, you give him a hug and show him some love.